Hey y'all, it's Laura. Welcome back to another Cocoa Vanilla Studios design team video. This time we are using the Happy Days collection to make a grid layout, and I absolutely love this rainbow stripe. So it is of course going to have a large portion of our layout today, and I'm using the B side of this beautiful rainbow as well. Now this beautiful B side has lovely little rainbow hearts all down the sides, and so I thought it would make a really nice border. And so it's going to be the outside edges of our layout, and the inside edges is going to be this beautiful stripe that is going to hold all 4 of my photos. Yes, we're getting 4 3x4 photos onto this layout. I do like to scrap with multiple photos. It's quite rare for me to use just one, and in this case we have 4. And we are detailing the process that my child, Charlie, gets their hair done every single summer. Once a year, we allow the bleaching of Charlie's hair so that they can have some really fun colors in their hair throughout the year. Now, this particular process takes quite a while. It takes a couple of hours usually, and they don't really enjoy that part, but they really like the bold colors that they can get in their otherwise very dark brown hair. So I am very interested to see what color they go for this year. These photos are from 2021 when they chose green, and this last year, 2022, they chose red. So we had to do some growing out of the green before we could do the red. And you can kind of see the reason for that on the very bottom photo. The edges of Charlie's hair there are quite brown still, and that's because they'd had red in previously. And so red and green, as it turns out, the color wheel is correct. It makes brown. So we have learned from past mistakes, and now we just do one big hair dye in the summer before school starts, because our school doesn't particularly care about hair colors, and go ahead and let them do whatever color they want, but then they grow it out for the rest of the year. And so by the end of the year, they just have colored tips, and the rest is just brown. And then by the following summer, they can go ahead and cut off all of the old color, redo this process, and get their hair dyed again. So it's a really fun way for my kiddo to express themselves, and I really enjoy watching their face light up when they do get to express themselves. So this lovely collection has a wonderful rainbow theme, which is just beautiful. It's a nice saturated color, and I really am enjoying that. As much as I love pastels, I also love bright, vivid color, and this collection absolutely has that. Now, I don't have a lot of room left on this layout for a big title, but I figured we could use some smaller words from the chipboard to create just a really small title up here in this top spot. And then at the bottom left, we have our journaling spot, which was one of the cut aparts from the collection. Now, I've also pulled off some little phrase stickers from the sticker sheet, and I've popped those around the outside of my page because I know I want to use those phrases. I'm just not entirely sure where I'm going to use them yet. And so I've pulled them off and put them onto my Fiskars mat because they won't stick to the Fiskars mat. And that way I can easily grab for them later and incorporate them into my embellishment clusters. Now, you may have noticed I also cut one of the frames in half, and that is from the specialty paper, which is kind of a new special thing that was included with this collection that I don't think we've had for a while, and was really excited about. The beautiful gold frames. I have fussy cut those out, and I've cut one of them in half and put it on either side of my grid just to give it a little bit of whimsy and a little funky look, so it's not perfectly up and down linear. I do like to start with a linear base in my layouts, but then I always try to just switch it up a little bit, add a little bit of a softer touch or a funky little bit that changes it to a more whimsical vibe rather than just linear. That is just my personal preference. I love the way that that looks. Another way to soften that look is to add some rounded shapes. So in this case, I've brought in some hearts all around the page. I've also brought in some florals and this beautiful little fun banner that has kind of a curvy shape to it. And that's going to add a little bit more of that whimsical vibe. It's going to soften the hard lines of all those rectangles and give it just a little bit more interest. I am bringing in this little rainbow at the top left. That'll do the same thing, as well as my camera that has that nice big circle in the middle. That will also help to just soften the look of those hard lines and edges. And this is a pretty easy way to do it. I think that it's a very useful way to get these beautiful little embellishments onto the page and not take away too much from my photos. Now, purposefully, when taking these photos, I did leave some space. So we have down at the bottom of all the photos, we just have the cape that they had to wear over their clothes, and so that's a great place to add in some embellishment without taking away from the photo itself. Also, in one of the center photos, you can see a lot of the ceiling, which also gives me a place to add in some embellishment that's not going to take away from the photo. So quite often I'm thinking about how I'm going to scrap these photos when I take the photos. And I try to make sure that I step back just enough that I have a little extra space to play with in these photos, because you can always crop them later. You can always go in and crop them down just a little bit if you need to be closer in. But I think it's helpful to step back a little when you take the photos so that you have that space to work with, a little bit of wiggle room when you're going to print them. Now, adding in all of these bits and pieces around the page, I have pulled in that chipboard title and then some of the hearts from the chipboard as well. And now I'm adding in those word phrases that I had pulled at the beginning of the layout that I knew I wanted to use, and adding the embellishment clusters on top of them. Now, these beautiful little rainbow pieces here were so sweet, and I love the fact that Zoe really just embraced the rainbow with this one. It was just full on vivid rainbow colors, and that is perfect for scrapping my kids. My kids love wearing bold color. As you can see in the bottom photo, Charlie was wearing a bright red tank top and then had green hair, and trying to find a collection that really incorporated both of those colors was challenging. These photos, like I said, are from 2 years ago, and I was having a hard time really finding a collection that embraced both. And this one worked, and as soon as I saw it, I knew I could scrap these photos, and I immediately went and pulled them out. So wrapping up this layout, I am just adding a little bit of tape behind my embellishment clusters to get them onto the page. Now, I personally prefer to use double-sided tape as my main adhesive, but I do also use a glue pen from Tonic as well. I do get questions occasionally about the type of adhesives that I like, and those two are my favorite. No fancy tape here, I just use an inexpensive one that I can get online. But if you're curious how I get things attached, that's my main method. This beautiful layout came together so quickly, and I was so glad that I finally got these beautiful photos scrapped. Finishing up with some scattering and splattering using these tiny little butterflies, as well as some little heart-shaped epoxy stickers for my scattering, and then I'll come in with Nuvo drops for splattering, and that's a controlled splatter if you're curious how I'm splattering with Nuvo drops. I do a little bit of controlled splatter first, and then I'll come in with some gold ink spray to do some uncontrolled splatter around the outside edges of the page, just to give it a little bit of gold sheen. And I also like the way that splattering adds this kind of a drift from the busier section of the page to the lighter section of the page, kind of easing away, gradually easing away from the busier side to the blank or empty side. In this case, my empty side really is full of tiny hearts, so it's not that empty, but it is a busy layout, and I really, really enjoy that this side boundary that I've created kind of softens that, gives your eye a place to rest, and that is a great way to offset a busy layout. Now, to finish this off, again, I am adding some tiny little bits and pieces around the page, and I do think that these details make the biggest difference on my layouts. I absolutely love this process of adding these tiny little details, which really just bring more attention to the photos. The focus of my layouts is always the photos and the story included in those photos. And so quite often I will only embellish right next to the photos to make sure that they remain the focus. Now, in this case, some of these photos are fairly repetitive because again, Charlie is just sitting in a chair getting their hair dyed, and there's not a lot exciting happening, but it's a process, and so it kind of shows you from beginning to end the process that Charlie chooses to go through to get these fun colors in their hair, and I think that's something fun to document as well. Here are those little epoxy hearts that I was talking about. They're kind of a puffy plastic, and when you touch them, they squeeze in just a little bit, which I love. I don't know why squeezing puffy hearts is so satisfying, but it really is. Am I the only one who sits there and squeezes the little puffy hearts? I have to wonder, because it is such a fun thing to do. Anyway, playing with this last bits and pieces on this layout, I am finishing it up with some tiny little hearts all around the page. And this, again, it just adds that little bit of detailing and a little bit of a different texture than the paper I've used all over the page. So I've squeezed in some chipboard, I've squeezed in some little puffy hearts, and that is one way to add some texture and dimension to your layouts without adding a lot of bulk in the process. Now, as I'm finishing up the last bits and pieces of this layout, I did want to let you know that the Cocoa Vanilla blog has a ton of inspiration, particularly for this new collection. So check that out at cocoavanilla.com/au. And I absolutely love seeing all of the beautiful layouts and projects that the girls create and change up every single month. Now, to finish this one off, I did, like I said, use some Nuvo drops, but I also drew some lovely little butterfly trails behind my butterflies, and that's just a fun way to add some movement to the page. And then I'm coming in with a gel pen to outline this base layer. That's it for this one, guys. I do hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, bye y'all.